Welcome to the Winfield Happy Hour, Season 1, Episode 2. I'm going to talk a little bit about water and a couple of the products that can be used to help mitigate water usage. And then Rob is going to get really in depth on some of the wetting agents that are available in the market and how they work in the soil and which ones you should choose to use in various situations. So to get started, just a little bit of information about water use and setting up water management zones and a couple wetting agent facts here and there. But so water usage by state. So we're talking to guys in Texas today. The thing with water studies is that in the US, we only look at data every 5 years or so. So this image on the left you see says irrigation from 2015, and that was the most recent data I could find. I couldn't find anything from 2020. I would imagine that at some point in the near future that we would get that information as well. So being that this is the most recent data, I thought I would share it. Texas obviously has one of the higher totals water usage in the United States, and it's a drier, hotter state, and there's a lot of people. You can see the image on the right there shows change in resident population July 2019 through 2020. And Texas is one of the states that received the most increase in population. So looking at those two images, we would assume that, most likely Texas would be one of the higher states again, as far as water usage, and for a good reason. There's a lot of people and it's a dry, hot area. So if you want a nice looking lawn, you got to put some water on it. This is a map I pulled today from the Syngenta website. What this is looking at is soil moisture as of today. And the bars on the left there show the data for Houston. So maybe not a good representation for some people in Texas, but just happened to be the city that I pulled from. So today's average soil moisture looking at about 40%, 5-year average just slightly below that, and 10-year average just slightly below that. So it looks like right on track for the Houston area. You can see the map there on the right would probably be about what you would expect for various parts of the country. Cities and states that are close to or east of the Mississippi probably have higher soil moisture content than some of the states in, the Rocky Mountains, Central Plains, Southwest locations. So probably about what you would expect. I also pulled a drought map for the United States, and this is predictive model. And I've looked at a couple others, so I'll show those in just a moment here. But as of March 16th, this is what they were showing for drought across the United States. So down in Texas, maybe about what you would expect on the very southern tip there, and a little bit more drought happening probably through the middle of the state than what maybe you have experienced in previous years. But the western states not looking too hot for this season, looking at some pretty exceptional drought for 2021.
Hey, quick question on that chart. Is that for the year or just for March?
I believe that this is more of a predictive model, what they would expect, and this is through this part of the year.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. So I pulled up the map on the left. There is not the same map as this March 16th. I actually pulled this left map on March 2nd, I believe, so just a couple weeks ago, and there's only been some minor changes, as you might expect. But I wanted to see what that looked like versus the same time last year, and some pretty dramatic differences. Obviously, year over year, you're going to have some differences with weather patterns changing and such, but I thought that was interesting to see. And then to take it another step further, I wanted to see how did this year's map and this is again March 2nd matchup against something a year like 2012. I remember it being warm in March up in Minnesota that year as well. So I just kind of wanted to compare the two. And a little bit different, some of the states with similar issues, but we'll see. There, I'm interested to see how this year plays out. All right, so I wanted to include this slide because salts can have an effect on the soil. And so when we say salts, we're talking about using fertilizers in high amounts of salt. Some irrigation that you use can be reclaimed or recycled water that can be high in salts. You've got rapid evaporation in arid climates, which can increase soil salt concentrations. Some soils may just have, natural sodium levels, and then in coastal regions, likely going to have some pretty salty soils. And one of the reasons why this can be a problem is that drought can lead to inadequate flushing of salts through the soil. And when you have that type of problem, soils high in salts and bicarbonates are going to drain poorly. And then to kind of keep the cycle going, poorly drained soils can't flush the excessive salts and bicarbonates. So it's kind of a repeating cycle that you're just making the soil and soil worse and having harder times growing grass. So this is an image. These are all cool season grasses, but you can see that they are affected by salts in the soil, and salt stress can look like many other different types of stress. So maybe you have an issue like this and you think that it might just be an irrigation issue if you have some good water, let's call it, and you're putting it out and you keep putting it out, but you have salt in your soil and not correcting the issues. You might think that maybe putting more nutrients or fertilizers that have high salts is going to correct the problem, because you don't know that salt is the actual issue. And so this can look like other stresses as well. You've got drought, you've got heat stress, you've got nutrient deficiencies, maybe it's an insect or a disease problem. So it's important to look at the soil as a whole and do some of those soil testing like we talked about last month. But salts can definitely have an effect on the soil and the turf at the end of the day. A couple of household water stats. I have a couple of interesting pictures here, and maybe you've seen something like this in your neighborhood or driving around in your city. But the picture on the bottom left there, just the irrigation is not properly designed. You've got most likely some inadequate pressure to the lines and the heads, improper spacing. Probably the zone is too large for the areas that you're trying to water. So making sure that you've got the proper system design, and then also making sure that the head is properly in place for the zone that it's supposed to be watering. That image on the right there, just getting quite a bit of water onto the driveway and most likely the sidewalk and other things. So just making sure that the heads in the system are working properly. But outdoor water use accounts for 30% of total household water use on average. Obviously in different states such as Texas, Arizona, New Mexico, Colorado, where more arid and hotter, you're going to have more percent of water use outside. And if the average size lawn in the US is watered for 20 minutes every day for 7 days, it can be like running the shower constantly for 4 days. I thought that was just kind of an interesting fact. Just kind of helps to show how much water can be wasted if you are not properly running your irrigation system or having a poorly designed system. Some other factors for water use in the US and waste. 50% of water use outdoors is lost due to wind, evaporation, and runoff caused by inefficient irrigation systems. Household with automatic landscape irrigation system that isn't properly maintained and operated can waste up to 25,000 gallons of water annually. And I'm going to see if this video link works. I think this is a pretty important visual just when looking at irrigation systems and how wind can have a pretty profound effect. You can see the wind just taking the water away and not allowing the droplets to hit in the areas where the sprinkler heads are turning. And that is kind of loud and annoying, so I apologize for that. But wind can have a pretty profound effect on your irrigation and loss of water. So making sure not to use your irrigation system if it's windy. Another point that was brought up in that last slide was runoff, and this is a video to kind of display what that looks like. So we've got 2 different petri dishes here full of some peat soil, hydrophobic peat soil. The one on the left is being treated with water that has some aquasync wetting agent in there, and the one on the right is just being treated with water. And this is what happens if you have a hydrophobic soil and you're trying to run your irrigation system. I'll run this one more time since I know it started while I was talking. But let's see here. Oh, there we go. So the petri dish that's being treated with the water by itself is just sitting on the top, and these are flat surfaces, so it just tends to sit where it's applied to. If you have a lawn situation, it has some slope, and you're going to get this running off to the driveway, the sidewalk, the gutter, what have you. If you apply a wetting agent to a soil, it's going to help move the water through the soil profile, and you're going to get that uniform wetting like you see in the petri dish there. And Rob's going to go pretty in depth on a couple of these items when he presents here. So just wanted to give you that visual and understand why runoff can be such a problem and why wetting agents can help with runoff. So best watering practices. This is something that you've probably seen, maybe not, hopefully not on your own lawn. I've seen this at warehouses and home lawns where people hit the sprinkler head with their mower or run over it with their car because it's right next to the driveway or the sidewalk. But making sure that your sprinkler heads are set properly and that they are not leaking, and that you have fixed broken heads when you see that issue. To audit your irrigation system, you can use cups, or they prefer tuna cans, tend to work pretty well. You want to make sure that you space them out evenly in a grid pattern throughout your lawn, and then try to use a minimum of 20 cans or cups for each irrigation zone. The more cans that you use, you're going to allow for greater accuracy of auditing your irrigation system. So after you place the cans throughout the zone, run the zone for 30 to 60 minutes. And the longer that you run the irrigation, the more accurate results you're going to get. This information I took off of the University of Minnesota Extension site. And if you're interested, I can get that link to you. Calculating precipitation rate of your irrigation system. Average depth of the water in the catch cans after 1 hour of runtime. So for example, if the average depth of the 20 cans was 3/4 of an inch and we ran the zone for 30 minutes, the precipitation rate would be 1.5 inches per hour. So once you've calculated the precipitation rate for each zone, you can set the run times. And so for example, if your goal is to apply 1/2 inch of irrigation in one cycle, the precipitation rate is 1.5 inches per hour. You would then set your zone for 20 minutes. So I said designing your system, or making sure that your system is designed properly, is important. The Rainbird website has a free design service that they offer and can be very useful if you are looking to update your system. I would also say that if you have a rain sensor, bravo, and if you don't, might be time to look into one. Obviously, this depends on where you're located and how much rain you get, if any, throughout the season. I would say water in the morning as much as possible to reduce evaporation, And like I showed in the previous video with the wind, try not to water in excessive wind conditions because it's just going to result in inadequate water throughout your soils. I mentioned the rain sensors. I put a couple of them on the slide here. These are pretty inexpensive and very useful for home systems. They help with turning off or alerting you when there's rain and when you don't need to water your lawn. I've also got a few products here shown, and the reason for that is these are wetting agents or other products that can help mitigate the use of water that you put on your yard. So variables to consider when determining how much you water your yard, things like soil type and soil characteristics, as well as plant type, temperature, and other environmental conditions like wind, rain, sun, and shade, etc. So products available to help lower water usage. We've got some wetting agents. Those would be items like Aqueduct Flex, AquaSync, AquaCare. The Aqueduct Flex is a granular product that can be used out of a rotary spreader. AquaSync is a liquid wetting agent that can be applied in a backpack sprayer or some type of real hose type of application unit. And then the AquaCare pellets you see there in the middle, that's kind of like a tennis ball tube. Those are kind of like soap pellets that you can put into a specially designed applicator that hooks up to your hose and go out and water the areas that need wetting agent. Maybe they have localized dry spot, or just you would like to add wetting agent to your program on a weekly or monthly basis. That might be the better way to go about it. A few other products on here. I included ProPeat. I know Rob has mentioned that in our previous presentation. ProPeat is made of peat, and anytime you add an organic material to your soil, you're going to help increasing that water holding capacity. And that's all kind of in one bag there with the nutrients and the peat pellets. The 46 Black is humate technology, and that's kind of along the same lines as the peat, whereas you're adding organic material to the soil profile, so helping in holding the water nutrients. I also included Terraplex on there in the bottom right. I did that because I mentioned the salts at the beginning of the presentation. This is a product that can be used to help kind of flush out some of the salts and really kind of reinvigorate the soil a little bit. And I know that there has been some success in Texas with that product, so I definitely wanted to mention that. Let's see, 2 more slides here. I've got this little chart I wanted to bring up because there are different use sites for various wetting agents, because you're trying to fix different problems by using each different type of wetting agent. At Winfield, we have a few wetting agents. These are 3 of our better selling products. Some of our more original type of technologies. They're not old technology by any means, but these are a few that we've had for a couple years, or a few years at least now. In sandy soils, if you're looking for water retention or to fix localized dry spot issues, AquaCare would be the best product to use for that. And again, we have those AquaCare pellets that kind of come in the tennis ball tube. If you're looking for penetration in sandy soils, AquaSync might be the best product to use for you. And that's going to be kind of a mid-tier cost position, whereas AquaCare is going to be a little bit more expensive. I would call that probably our Cadillac product of our wetting agent line. For more of a clay loam soil, if you have localized dry spot or looking for water retention, AquaSync would be the best product there. And you see that AquaSync is listed for both water penetration into the soil profile as well as water retention. This is a combo product that does both very well, and we've seen good results with this product in all type of situations, looking for moving water through the profile as well as holding it in the root zone. And then if you have water penetration issues, need to work on moving your water through the soil profile, Aquaflow Plus is another product that we carry that does a very good job of moving water through the soil profile, especially if it's more of a clay or loam soil. All right, this last slide that I've got for you, and then I'll hand it over to Rob, is just a neat little video to show what happens in sand when you add water that has been treated with a wetting agent and water by itself. Now, obviously, sometimes you're not going to be watering with a wetting agent, but this similar type of situation would happen if you have previously treated the soil with the wetting agent. So it's not like you have to apply a wetting agent every time you go out and water your yard. Wetting agents are broken down by microbes in the soil over time. And so if you apply a certain amount of wetting agent to your soil, it should last for 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6 weeks, depending on how much, as well as the soil temperatures. So I'll run this one more time just so you can see it. And again, left is treated water with the wetting agent. On the right, you have water by itself, and this is elapsed over 1 minute. The AquaSync treated water moves through the profile, as you can see, whereas the water without the wetting agent in the solution doesn't even make it through the top part of the sand particles there. It just sits on top. So you can see that not getting any water into the root zone would cause lots of issues. You're going to get some runoff there, as well as you're going to be watering quite a bit more in order to get the results that you're desiring. So that is it for my presentation. I know that was pretty quick.
One of the things that I also wanted to add, just a little side note on your presentation, is you'll hear different parts of the country will have what they talk about as the ET calculation. That's the evaporation, transpiration calculation. And that's something that when you look at ET, it takes into account the Langley's, which is sun intensity, temperature, humidity, and the plant coefficient. So there is a way to, is that better, Rachel?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, so that's a way to calculate how much you actually need to water. So along the way, when we deal with some of these golf courses, sports turf complexes, etc., you can actually do an ET calculation through the weather station. I know some of those newer residential weather stations even have this capability. It allows you to kind of calculate based on your weather how much you need to water each day, and it also takes into account what you're growing. You know, Bermuda grass and bluegrass fescues do not have the same plant coefficient. All right. So great lead in, Kevin. I think a lot of the things that you talked about, I'll clarify a little bit. And what I'm going to do is talk about a little bit more about the chemistry and the science behind wetting agents and how to improve our water management for just an overall better turf health quality of what we're trying to maintain. So a little bit of background. When we create issues, Kevin mentioned localized dry spot, areas that we just absolutely, no matter how much we water them, are not able to maintain either good water movement into the soil, or they're not able to hold any soil. And what we have happen is that our soil particles, because of having plants, whether it's turf or ornamentals, growing on those sites, are going to produce organic acids. And it's just it's a nonstop process that occurs in our soils. So these organic acids are very non-polar coatings. Now remember, good old H2O has a very polar, is a very polar molecule. It has a very negative charge around the oxygen, and then slightly positive charges around the hydrogens, and it's due to the movement of the electron clouds of those three atoms. So you see that over time, you will see slowly increasing amounts of these organic acids on the soil particles. So if you look at the second image I have here, you have the non-coated sand particles, very clean, almost no acid. Over time, we start to see, and that's a very non-hydrophobic. So non-hydrophobic, that's also another word would be hydrophilic, where you have water-loving particles. Now, as over time, we start to develop these organic acids, and that creates a hydrophobic. So not only will the soil not hold the water that we're applying to it, it will not allow it to enter the soil. It just is not, it's a very non-polar part. So we have the polar water, non-polar. They don't like each other, essentially. How do the coatings influence the water movement? So when we start to develop these coatings, we have a couple things happen. We have preferential flow, where we have the coatings causing water to move better into certain areas. It may make them so that they flow right past the root zone, and we don't retain any of our irrigation to maintain our plants, or we get poor distribution. And we see that all the time in native soils, where we have areas that are, if we put in, we use the soil core, we find we've just watered and it's almost completely dry. That's going to be what we talk about with localized dry spots. Or we have areas where all the water flows to, and we have wet spots. So we get this non-uniform watering. So what happens is we try to overwater the localized dry spot areas, creating even wetter conditions on our other end in many parts of the country where we're actually buying water because we're not working off of either irrigation ditches or some type of a reservoir system. So we're actually paying money for water. We're going to overwater and overspend to try to adequately water those localized dry spots. Now, this also exasperates what Kevin was talking about, poor irrigation design. I spent 10 years working in the lawn care industry, and we saw it all the time. We take over a new property, again, the head spacing and all the factors that Kevin talked about, they were at the site. So we had bad head placement. We didn't have enough pressure. So in many cases, we would retro and redesign the irrigation system in hopes of getting good uniform water distribution. So we're going to talk a little bit about the soil moisture dynamics. And basically that's how does water move into the soil, and then how does it affect our turf that we're trying to maintain. So what we would like is we would like to have matrix flow. When we water, all the areas have the same amount. Going back to where Kevin showed you the cups and the tuna cans, trying to figure out our overall water distribution for the site, and we get good matrix flow. So we water, and it all, after an irrigation cycle, moves 4 to 6 inches into the soil. That would be the perfect scenario. Now, we look at the second part of the slide, but we have runoff, whether it's from irrigation, whether it's from rainfall, but we have areas that are dry and other areas that are excessively watered or actually holding water in the soil to the point where we have puddling. Now, we have to also remember that our soil has a pore space. So if we have two choices, we can fill the pore space with oxygen and gases, or we can fill the pore space with water. If we fill the pore space with water, we get into an anaerobic condition. Anyone that's dug into an irrigation break or done a repair on their property, they get that sulfur smell coming out. When you have that, that's an anaerobic condition. So if we start to be working around our property, doing irrigation repairs, whatever, and we get that smell, we need to understand that that's the soil telling us that we have an anaerobic condition, that we are holding too much water in the pore space to the point where now we're starting to get decomposition on an anaerobic level. So we're going to look at infiltration. When we have poor infiltration, we water, and the water that we've applied sits on the soil. Now, if the water sits on the soil, what's going to happen? We're going to have evaporation. So we're going to lose that watering cycle. So to overcome that, we either have to saturate to the soil to the point where we have large amounts of standing water, or we have to utilize wetting agents, etc., to try to accommodate that. Now, one thing to also remember is that another thing that is very hydrophobic is thatch. So if you have an older yard where you start to develop large amounts of thatch, maybe haven't been able to aerate, could be a slope in the yard that's just really hard to aerate. So we're not getting good mechanical aeration in the spring and the fall. We may need to increase that and be able to aerate better in hopes of getting better infiltration. Now, we also have poor hydration, and basically poor hydration is where the soil just cannot hold the water. Thus, we water, we do a core sample, and the soil's dry. That's another sign of localized dry spot. So some of the things that come into play with soil moisture dynamics, infiltration rates are influenced by the soil texture, sand, silt, and clay. We have 3 different types of soil. We would love to all work with a sandy loam, which would be a nice sand, light sand soil with a large amount of loam, which is the medium-sized particle. Again, with our soil particles, sand's the largest, silt, medium-sized particles, clay are the smallest particles. In many parts of the country where I live now, and I know from talking to some of the people that were on the first presentation, where you guys deal with a lot of heavy clay soils. They're all over the western United States. So very small particle size. So if we have small particle size, they're able to be packed tightly together. If we have traffic, that's going to exacerbate that condition. And so we're going to get very tight, not much pore space, not going to be able to hold oxygen or water or move efficiently water into that tight pore space. Soil structure. So we have other soil aggregates and things in the soil, the arrangement of our sand, silt, clay. So the USGA has worked out, and there's charts that are readily available online to show you based on your soil test. And this would be the physical part of the soil test. And this is something that a lot of people no longer do. We have that capability when we run soil tests to look at the physical structure, because you may get a soil test back that I have plenty of nutrients, seems like a good soil, my pH is okay, but I'm still not getting the water performance that I'm looking for. It may be a physical characteristic of our sand, silt, clay rather than a chemical characteristic. So again, back to the pore space and size, depending on the ratio of those 3 types of soil particles, that's going to change our pore space and the size and the ability to hold water. So if we have a very, very sandy soil, water's going to move more easily into it because our particles are bigger. So the space in between them, when we fit them all together, is going to create larger pore space. If we have a very tight clay soil, which is what we experience here in Colorado, we have almost no pore space because of how tightly all those uniform small particles will come into play. So when they do that physical, they will actually do a measurement of the sieve gradient number, size of the particle, so that we know that how much potential our soil has to hold and move water. Another thing that comes into play, and this has a little bit more effect on our organic matter, is our soil an older soil, so it has that long-term accumulation of those organic acids, and is it a very hydrophobic soil? So that's where we get those localized dry spots, where we have areas that just will not hold water no matter how much we water. So we look for other ways to deal with that. The last variables are going to be thatch, and we've talked about thatch a little bit. And basically thatch is on that layer between the root system and the crown. So the crown is where the turf is actively growing upward towards the blade. So that's where it's growing every week, and we mow based on our mowing interval. Below that is the root system. The more root system we have, the deeper into the soil it goes. If we have good pore space and a nice soil, we can get root system. We see this all the time in photos where you look at a root system on, say, a putting green because it's sand, easy for the roots to penetrate into the sand and to develop a deep root system. You'll see roots that are almost a foot long. In many cases, we get into our tighter soils, our clay soils especially, and we may only have 2 or 3 inches of root mass because that's all the deeper that they can get. Now, going back to the oxygen point, when we're looking at root systems like oxygen. They like that gas exchange. So if we don't have good oxygenation in the soils, then we're not going to have a very healthy root system. And if you ever are digging areas, working in your soils around your plants, and you notice that the newest root hairs are not white and they're more of a blackish brown color, we have an anaerobic condition and it needs to be addressed. So how does water move into the soils? Well, basically we have gravity, and that's just basically the gravity of the earth drawing those liquids down through the pore space. And then we also have capillary action. This is the primary driving force for unsaturated soils. So what happens with capillary action is, because it's like a straw. If you took a plate and filled it, like a pie plate, filled it full of water, and took a thin straw and stuck it into it, because of the surface tension created by the water, it would actually start to draw the water up the straw, even though there's no vacuum or anything being applied to the straw. So we have gravity drawing it down, and that's a much weaker force, and then capillary action. So capillary action is going to be driven by the pore space of the soil. If we have no pore space, we can't have any capillary action. And then along with this, we also have adhesion, and this is where water is attracted to the soil. So we have that where we have the positively charged soil particles grabbing onto the positive or the negative part of that soil particle. And then we also have cohesion, where the water molecules, because of the polarity, attract to each other. So we have a good video, little presentation here where it shows, where you'll notice where the oxygens are in the water, we have the negative portion of the molecule. Where we have the hydrogens, that's the positive portion. Opposites attract, so the hydrogens like to attach to the oxygens, and because we have only those two in a very simple molecule, we get that cohesion that we see. Now, adhesion is where we want the water to attract to the soil particle. So we would much rather have adhesion where the water that we're applying attaches to the soil, stays in a place in the root zone where we can have the roots uptake our irrigation cycle. If it's too strong, and that's the same thing you saw, the cohesion in Kevin's last slide, that was a great example of cohesion. How the water was, the water attraction was so strong that without the surfactant, without the wetting agent, it was not allowing the water to, so the cohesion was greater than the capillary action of the soils. And all these are forces that there are measurements that can be done on a physics basis. So we can measure them, and actually if the cohesion is greater than the adhesion or greater than the capillary action, we're not going to have good movement into the soil. So now this slide shows where we have that same soil particle, and it now has, it's an older soil, so now it has started to accumulate the nonpolar organic coating. And that's basically in my slide here, the gray coating around the soil particle. And because of that, we will have the lack of adhesion because of the hydrophobic condition. And what happens? We water, and all of our irrigation passes through our soils, and moves outside the root zone because of the hydrophobic condition of the soil particle. So what we get then is, instead of our matrix flow, which is what we are shooting for, we get fingered flow, where we have areas where the water shoots right through the soil particle, isn't allowed to adhere to the soil, and it's lost outside the root zone. In the matrix flow, where we have that nice uniform blue area from our, this is actually infrared data that they did at Cornell, and you show that you have good uniform. If we can keep the water in that zone, and that's the zone where our roots are at, then we have good water uptake by the plants that we're trying to grow. So hydrophobic soils, and this is something I run into all the time in the Western United States. It's really the most troubling thing, especially in the drier, more arid parts of the United States, for turf grass managers. That water repellency, because again, the clay are the smallest particles in these very fine textured clay soils, don't allow water to move into the soils, and then over time they create that hydrophobic condition with the organic acids. So what do we have to do? Well, wetting agents and some of the things that Kevin mentioned earlier are what we're going to go over, and I'm going to show you how they can help you improve your water performance. So in a nutshell, how do wetting agents work? Basically, wetting agents have been around in the turfgrass industry since the 50s. The original ones were, in many instances, alcohol-based. And over time, we've started to develop more and more ways to create products that do the two things that are most important for a wetting agent, and those are water penetration into the soil so that we don't have evaporation and runoff, and then also holding capacity so that when we do water, we keep the water in the root zone where it can be most efficiently used by the plant. Just some brief trials where you see this area has been completely dried down. You'll notice areas where, and it was a trial where there was multiple kinds of wetting agents. This was done at the University of Arkansas. And you'll see that in certain areas, when we went to full wilt, full dry down, we had areas that look as though they've been watered recently, when in actuality in the study, they had not been watered for, I think, 14 or 21 days. So, very good visual on how well wetting agents work in this dry down drought situation. One of the things that, kind of in a nutshell, wetting agents act by reducing the surface tension. So that's that cohesion between those polar water molecules, and also will then increase the adhesion to our soil particles. So breaking the surface tension allows them to move into the soils. We saw that in Kevin's videos that he showed us. And then depending on the types of wetting agent that we're using, we will show increased retention in the soil and in the root zone. This is a slide that we show, and water only, very polar, lots of surface tension. So that water droplet clings there. Think about when you take and wash and wax your car, springtime, we're getting out there, we're cleaning everything up, getting ready for the summer season, and we see that water beating up on that waxy, wax being a hydrophobic surface, so we bead the water. We add in our non-ionic wetting agent, we break that surface tension. So now the water is in a condition where it's going to be allowed to move into the soil rather than sit on the soil being affected by evaporation. So how do we do this? So because we have that hydrophobic coating on all of our soil particles, and I had a friend, Jason Habeck, he's a Toro rep now. He did his master's degree at Iowa State, and he measured how fast, with a professor at Iowa State, that occurs. Literally, as soon as we start putting turf grass or other plants into soil, we start to generate organic acids because those organic acids are coming off of the root system as part of the metabolic process of the plant. So what we do is we create what we talk about as the lollipop. So we have the hydrophilic, water-loving end of the polar end of the molecule. So likes attract likes, so basic, freshman chemistry. And those molecules will attach, the water will attach to the polar end. Now we need to get something to attach to the soil particle. So they create the stem portion of the wetting agent, and they create a non-polar, so water repelling, but again, likes attract likes. So it attaches to that waxy organic acid coating that's on our soil particles because we're growing a crop on the soil, basically. So wetting agents, they essentially, we're getting back to that we have to reduce that surface tension of the water to the point where we can allow the water to infiltrate into the soils and then attach to that hydrophobic soil particle being caused by the organic acids. So with no surfactant, with a surfactant, we allow it to infiltrate into those soils. So essentially, if we didn't use the wetting agent, we would have that same condition that Kevin showed, where we have water sitting on the soils, but not being able to move in. And again, in his example, he uses sand. So that's the best possible situation. As we start to deal with smaller pore space, tighter native soils, higher clay soils, etc., we're going to even increase and exacerbate this effect. So let's talk a little bit about some of the wetting agent chemistries that are available and some of the options that we have. Now, this is a part of our industry that there are 1,000,001 different terms and as many claims. I see a new one every day. Uniform wetting, water holding capacity. So we have to kind of get past all of this and figure out just exactly what we're trying to accomplish, and then what is the best type of product to accomplish that situation. So basically, differences among wetting agents. Where do they bind to the soil? Are they penetrants that they move deeply into the soil? Are they more of a retention product that binds to the soil just below the thatch area? And then also, because we do deal with some of the other turf situations, how's it going to affect the soil firmness? So if we have wetting agents that hold all of the water right at the top, we get a somewhat wet, not stable, not firm soil surface. How long do they last? So, and when we look at wetting agents, we have to look at the fact that the majority of wetting agents are very large carbon-based molecules. So our soil microbial population loves carbon. So when you look at the rates of wetting agents, many times we have an amount and it's going to last so long. If we add more, it's going to last longer. So we need to look at how much we're going to apply and how long we want it to last, either by when we get outside of the dry period of our season or when we need to make another application. Now, phytotoxicity, and this is the biggest part about wetting agents. When you look at a lot of the research that's done in Arkansas and some of the other universities in the United States that have research and do a lot of work with wetting agents, many of the early wetting agents had an alcohol portion. Well, if we go out and put an alcohol or a glycol-based product on our soils, then we have the potential for burn. Many of those early products needed to be watered in immediately. They were very effective, but if we didn't water them in right away, we would have phytotoxicity. And then the ability to correct localized dry spot. How are they going to be able to hold water in those highly hydrophobic areas? Now, if we choose a penetrant and not a retention product, we may move water through the localized dry spot area, but not hold any water there. So we need to choose our products where we have holding capacity. If we have large areas of localized hydrophobic soils, and localized dry spot. As far as treating the organic acids, one of the things that Jason found in his study was that no matter if you use some of these products, and they're out there on the market, they're products that will actually strip those organic acids off the soil particles. Ours is a product that would be similar to that, that's sold readily today. But these organic acids, they start to accumulate almost immediately. So when we start to look at that type of a treatment plan for these organic acids that are coating our soil particles and creating this hydrophobic condition, we must, remember that it's going to be a very repetitive program. So really, in a nutshell, when we look at wetting agents, how long do they last, and how many times do we have to apply to achieve an entire season of treatment? So wetting agent chemistries, they're not all created equal. They're all slightly different, and this is something, as we've been doing product development, Kevin and I at Winfield with wetting agents, we find that all the time. There's different products for ornamentals, different products for true. So working with a good reputable company that knows what they're trying to accomplish will help us choose the best possible wetting agent. Are we trying to cure localized dry spot? Do we have a very, very tight pore space? So we're trying to improve our infiltration. Are we trying to create a uniform matrix water application versus that non-uniform flow that I showed in the earlier slide? Are we trying to reduce our irrigation? Has in our part of the country water gotten so expensive that if my water bill is X, and I've dealt with some golf courses and some other people in the Las Vegas area, some of these golf courses spend over $1 million a year on water. So if you can develop products and put programs in place that reduce that, I know in our residential lawn setting, it's a much smaller scale, but still nobody wants a $500 water bill. So we can utilize wetting agents, specifically the retention type products, to maximize our irrigation and try to lower our overall water bill. They also do have a place in helping with our soil applied pesticides, if we're utilizing insecticides for grubs, etc. Can we move those more uniformly into the soils to get better control? And finally, because we do deal with sports and with golf, what's the firmness of the surface after we make our applications? So all those things come into play when we start looking at what types of wetting agent chemistry we're going to choose. Briefly, our three basic categories for surfactants. We have our non-ionics. These are the most common. There's basically 6 different chemistry classes that fill this category. They're also the least phytotoxic. So utilizing these in hot, dry, arid climates are going to be the least detrimental to our turf grass, to our ornamentals that we're trying to maintain better water performance. They also have high soil residual, so they stick around longer. So the interval between applications is going to be less with these types of products. Our anions, these are negatively charged. So we had no charge. Now we have negatively charged. These are the phytotoxic ones. Those are the glycols, the alcohols, the lower priced wetting agents that are still available on the market. Now, because of the way that the charge that they have and the way that the chemistry is designed in these products, they have lower soil residual, and you also have the potential for leaching because nothing's grabbing onto them and holding them in the root zone. So they're just going to leach through the root zone. So this would be the least favorable category for wetting agents. The final one, these are the cations who are positively charged. Now remember, in our soils, all of our nutrients, other than the nitrates, are all positively charged molecules. So our irons, our calcium, magnesium, manganese, etc. These are all positively charged. So we start to play with cationic wetting agents, positively charged. start to throw off the overall chemistry of the soils. Also very high phytotoxicity, so they can harm the turf grass and the other ornamentals that we're trying to work with. So of all of these, because of how they affect our overall soil chemistry and also that high phytotoxicity, these are the least used. So the majority of the products that we're going to talk about and look at are going to be non-ionics. So basically, I break down the non-ionics into a couple of categories. We got the block copolymer surfactants. These are going to be our most commonly used. The majority of the wetting agents that you see on the market are going to fit into this category. They're great at reducing our soil water repellency, so they help move water into the soils. They improve our overall soil moisture content, so they have good retention capabilities. They're able to move uniformly into the soils so that they have good overall moisture uniformity. So when we water a zone, we're not having dry and wet areas under the same zone, which is, again, for irrigation, that's one of the hardest things to correct, is if we have a dry spot and a wet spot in the same zone. And they also are not have as high of a affinity to water, so they don't hold on to the water so tightly that they keep the water in the soils and don't allow the root system of the plant to take the water in. And a good example of something that would have a greater affinity than the root system are polyacrylamide type products. The swelling gels, there was a huge trend where let's incorporate those into our soils. Well, those products have such a great affinity for water that when there's water available, they're going to pull it from wherever they can. So they're going to pull it from the soils. They could also pull it from your root system and desiccate your plant. So the co-block polymers have very good overall performance in our soils for what we're trying to accomplish with wetting agents. Then our block copolymers, these are basically bigger molecules. It takes longer for the microbial activity in the soils. So we get products that have label rates where we can put one application down and have it last. The example here, you'll see 1690. That's a 16 ounce per 1,000 rate, 90 days of wetting agent. So these are longer, bigger molecules. They also do not move and are not leached outside the root zone. So when you apply them, water them incorrectly, they're going to stay where you want them to in the soils. A newer category, you'll see AquaCare is in this category. That's a reverse block copolymer, in changing the chemistry of the molecule a little bit. So in a sense, it's even more, has a greater affinity for moisture retention. So we start to get better moisture retention. We bring those rates down. Maybe we still have a, every 4 to 6 week application interval, but we're able to maintain better moisture retention. So subtle differences between those two categories on how much we put them out, how often we put them out, and then how good they are at moisture retention in the soils. What we're getting into now are blends. And one of the things that Kevin mentioned was AquaSync, and that would be ultimately our blend where we have good water movement and also water retention. So blends are becoming more and more popular. I had a conversation with Dr. Doug Soldat from the University of Wisconsin at one of our training seminars that we were giving out in Washington. And Dr. Doug, he made the comment that when we look at all these categories for wetting agents, and I have more listed here and more examples of what type these are, but he made the comment that we don't know exactly how all of these wetting agent molecules will affect our soils. So in many cases, we see both penetration, water movement, and also water retention out of many products that maybe most people would fit into one category or the other, but in actuality, their performance is somewhere in the middle. Going back to the anionic surfactants, Older chemistries, very fast wetting, but high potential for phytotoxicity. So the customers, superintendents, sports turf managers, etc., in the early days of wetting agents that were utilizing these types of products, if they didn't utilize them per the recommendations and how the label was worded, would see damage, yellowing, burning of turf. Well, obviously, if we're going to apply wetting agents, we don't want to set our turf back because we didn't correctly use the product. So really, we don't see a whole lot of these products used in the industry anymore. Now we're going to talk about now some application strategies on how to put these products out. Obviously, liquid is going to be the easiest. It's going to be the most common. Many of these products are easily tank mixed with other products. So you'll see people put out the nutritional programs, potentially an insecticide or fungicide application along with their wetting agent. And we have a lot of products that are available in a liquid form. Granulars, they're very convenient. We have to look at the carrier, and thus we have to also look at, can we put it on a nutritional product? Can we put it on other plant healthcare type products, mycorrhiza, organics, etc., and also the ingredients. One of the things we have to keep in mind is these are products that we want to apply them to dry turf and then water them in. So we need to look at when we can make our applications versus the liquids. Pretty much we can make those at any time during the day, and we don't have an effect of wet or dry turf. Some just simple things to look at when we're applying wetting agents. We want to irrigate immediately or within 24 hours, depending on the product. The majority of the products we have, the way we've designed the chemistry, they have the ability to not need to be watered in immediately. If we're dealing with some of those older anionics products that I listed previously, those would need to be immediately watered in to decrease the phytotoxicity. So when we're looking at the products that we're going to recommend, most of those have put them down. If you can water them in, that's going to be the best approach. But if you can't, then they're not going to create a phytotoxic effect on your turf grass. We do talk about pre-wetting. We don't want to do that with the granulars, but we can do that, and that will allow for lower phytotoxicity and better adhesion to the leaf. Now, because we're trying to get these products down into the soils in most cases, that's why we're going to irrigate right after. Going back to, I mentioned tank mixes, and this is a little more common in other types of turf applications, but we are able to mix them with foliars. They will also, in many instances, improve our nutritional performance because of the surfactant that's in the tank, because of the wetting agent. So if we want to get better leaf uptake and we are making a foliar application, potentially adding a wetting agent is going to improve the performance of those products. Here I have a picture of a hose end applicator. Kevin mentioned the AquaCare tablets. Great product. If you haven't seen one before, what you see here is what's called a quick coupler. It's basically an easy way to link into your irrigation system. I have designed some home residential. I had a friend that had a large, it was almost 5,000 square foot yard. We wanted to utilize some other products, so we put quick couplers, and I designed them in the irrigation system. Very easy to use, great way, but that is a picture of the tablet. Very easy, again, very easy to use, and you're able to hit those areas where you have problems. And that's one of the things that we see with wetting agents, again, where we have parts of the soil structure of our property that are good. We have trouble areas. This type of a system allows us to treat those areas efficiently with the tablets. So the next part, we're going to talk a little bit about irrigation injection systems. I have from questions that I got from our last happy hour that we had. And I did mention this to a few people that sent me emails. There are some very good residential irrigation injection systems. I've seen both liquid and solubles. You can improve your irrigation efficiency. Basically, if we add the wetting agent when we're putting out our water, we're going to get better movements. It's actually similar to the videos that Kevin's showing, helping to move the water into the soil. Because we don't have to make any applications, we're going to reduce the labor, and we're going to be able to make those applications much more uniformly on a better schedule. So in a nutshell, when I have people utilizing an irrigation system, we'll usually put out the surfactant, the wetting agent, one to two times per week, every couple of irrigation cycles. So we always have small amounts of material in the soils to help improve performance of our irrigation. Sometimes we get into areas where we have natural vegetation, or if we have a slope that we're growing turf on, that's a hard situation to apply even with a granular. So this allows us to put wetting agents out onto those hard topographies or in natural vegetation areas where we still want to maintain good irrigation performance. And they can be applied on an automated and more frequent basis. So you set up your program with your irrigation clock, where you kick on that fertigation system, that injection system, once a week, twice a week, like I had mentioned, and it's all automated. We know that we're utilizing our materials, very, very easy to use. So just to kind of summarize, we're going to look at the characteristics that we look for in a wetting agent and kind of how important they are. Obviously, preventing and helping to cure localized dry spot, getting those areas that just will never wet to wet and hold water. That's going to be our number one. Moisture uniformity, getting good uniform moisture out of maybe a potentially inefficient irrigation system. It's going to be this next most important. Getting good moisture infiltration into the soils so that we can move that water, so the water doesn't pool, our irrigation cycle doesn't pool on the soil surface, so that we can move water into the soils and not risk evaporation. Increasing the stress tolerance. If we have a deeper, stronger root system, healthier turf grass stand, we're going to be able to withstand stress, whether it's traffic, insects, disease, whatever. We'll be able to maintain better stress tolerance. When we get into the residential setting, firmness of the surfaces isn't as important, but I'll tell you that I have had people who will be like, I have a large residential yard and I have the areas where the kids always are wearing down those surfaces. It's always soft and muddy. What can we do? And I have utilized surfactants and wetting agents in this situation to help cure these, problems. So they do have a fit, and we do, if we were able to say, I can utilize wetting agents to improve the entire firmness, dry up those wet, muddy spots in my yard, I'm not having to deal with the dogs and the kids, etc., then that is something that has value and within utilizing wetting agents. So the next one, lowering our water consumption. When we get into areas where we're looking at having to actually pay, and here in Colorado, we're starting to get into areas, if you can maintain your usage in a certain level, we only pay X per 1,000 gallons of water. If you go over that, now you're paying a higher rate. So maintaining at those lower rates helps us save money, helps us be more efficient with our watering. So, and on down the list, but I mean, you see that we've talked about many of these, but I really think that the first couple are by far the most important parts of utilizing a wetting agent. So some general classes here, retention products, you see AquaCare there on the list, are penetrants, AquaFlow Plus would be the Winfield, Sea Dispatch, and Duplex. Those are also very common. The blends, you see AquaSync, and you'll also see Synergy. And I'll briefly talk about Synergy a little bit at the end of the presentation. Our injectables, Aquaflow Plus has not only a penetrant, but it also has an injection part of the label. So there are products that you can not only spray or apply through spray application equipment, but you can also inject. The long-term products, I have talked to Aaron, our proprietary products manager, and I have put AquaCare out because of the low burn potential at very high rates and gotten more of that long-term, like we get with a 1690, where it's 16 ounces, 90 days control. Ors, I mentioned that earlier. That's an organic acid removal product. Not nearly as popular because, again, with those organic acids, as soon as you remove them off the soil particle, they start reaccumulating and coming back. So it's more of a band-aid fix rather than a long-term approach to water management. So, summary of our wetting agent applications. Again, wetting agents are broken down by the microbes. That's why we have to continually reapply them when we have the situation and the weather that makes them necessary. Turf water needs, they do vary throughout the year, and approximate ET calculations, I mentioned that earlier. Again, that's, sun intensity, temperature, humidity, and the plant coefficient based on the species you're raising and trying to grow. They will help determine the amount of water that you need to apply and how often over a week time. Soil types, back to the old sand, silt, and clay I mentioned earlier, where you have certain soil types that are better at water management, water usage. We have other types, like in our tight clay soil, small particles, where we need to look at other things that we can do to help improve our water performance. The soil's ability does change throughout the year. One of the things that we see right now in a lot of parts of the country where it's been very dry, in an area that doesn't get a lot of natural moisture or snowfall over the winter, we'll have to re-wet those areas. Wetting agents can help us do that. So if you're in an area where you have very dry winter conditions, utilizing wetting agents early on in the spring will allow us to move those waters, re-wet those soils in a much more efficient and quicker manner. And then we need to look at the rates and the product implications of what we're trying to accomplish. So how are we going to put them out? What are we going to put out? If we can only do granulars, if we can only do this, if we can only do that, that'll help us help you choose which products are going to be most beneficial for your situation. So I want to go a little bit into our fertilizer energized with a wetting agent. This is something that here in Colorado I've been very successful with the landscape and the lawn care maintenance and even residential usage of wetting agents. So basically, here's a great picture, just like what we talked about earlier. On the left, we have water moving efficiently into the soils. On the right, we have water, because of that surface tension, sitting on the soils. So we have decreased infiltration, we have non-uniform wetting, we increase our runoff, increase our evaporation, that preferential flow where we have it moving through certain areas better than others, localized dry spot, all the stuff that we talked about during the presentation today. So what does our synergy do? It basically saves on our water bill, it reduces our water usage, keeps water and fertilizer and other chemicals on your lawn. So if we're utilizing insecticides, fungicides, etc., they're not being applied and then being leached out and moved outside the water zone, being taken away in runoff. In a nutshell, less stressed out areas. Some of the photos that Kevin showed earlier where you had areas around the heads, deep dark green. Other areas that we had heavily stressed turf grass in heavy levels of desiccation. So one of the things we have to look at in many parts of the country, especially areas where you're working off of reservoirs or runoff, we're not drawing water out of an aquifer, is when we have no runoff like we run into here now in Colorado, where it gets so low late in the year that we just don't have anything in the ditch to draw from, or in situations where the consumption now, because of population, that was a great slide that Kevin had earlier, as we see these areas of population, or the water system that was designed 50 years ago isn't capable of sustaining the new population. So water is a limited resource in many of these areas in the country, Texas, and all over the West. So we need to be able to increase our water performance. One of the things I wanted to finish up briefly on is also humates, and many of the products that we're working on in our fertilizers especially have a combination of both, because not only can we utilize wetting agents to improve our performance, but we can also utilize the benefits of humates and humic and fulvic acids to help with a synergy, not to reuse the term, but help with the performance of our wetting agents. So humic and fulvic acid sources, these are basically materials that are a decayed biomatter. We mine them in Arizona and in New Mexico especially. They're leonardite shale deposits. They're a lignite coal, and they are able to help substantially with our soil structure, which can also help improve our water performance. Some of the benefits of humates: increased root respiration and root formation, stronger root zone, stronger health. Improve our cation exchange. So in a nutshell, that's going to be where we move those positive nutrients, the calcium, magnesium, iron, etc., from the soil into the plant. They also do, because they're a great carbon source, help to improve the microbial population, the mycorrhizal fungi in the soils. So we're going to improve our microbial population, and our mycorrhizal fungi help assist in nutrient uptake at the root hair. They do also improve our soil aeration and water retention. Heavy compacted soils. Many of these regions that we're dealing with, both in Texas, from talking to people that have sent me stuff since the last talk, and also asked questions about high carbonate, high salt. These will help with that. And then they do also, in sandy soils, help hold on to more nutrients in the soil. So it does help us with our water and nutrient losses in sandy soils. They also are natural volatilization inhibitors. So in a nutshell, when we have nitrogen that we apply to the soils, we can lose its volatilization or to leaching. So they improve both of those, but very beneficial, and also have a good complement to our wetting agents. We have it in liquid form, so you would be able to spray it out on your turf grass, mix it into your liquid programs. And we also do add in some kelp, which give us some natural plant stimulants, cytokinins, gibberellic acid, etc. And then also do add in some chelated micronutrients, just a good overall package. So if you are doing liquid applications, this would be a great way to feed the microbial population and to also increase that aeration and water movement in the soils. You could make liquid applications with some of the new liquid application equipment that we're going to list on the website now, where you'll be able to do good end of hose applications and be able to get the rates correct for these products. So basically what we do is we micronize humates and then apply them as a coating to the fertilizers. We do this in most situations now with the synergy. So the majority of the products that we sell as a granular form on fertilizer will have both technologies. And that's kind of why I wanted to list and talk about both, because that's the majority of the ways that Winfield applies them to, both the 46 black humate coating and also the wetting agent. So because we're putting them on all of the material, we have good uniform distribution. This has been very common in the other turf grass parts of our industry, golf, sports turf, etc., where they'll make a liquid tank mix up. We talked about that earlier, but we didn't have a lot of choices for granulars. So this allowed us to, in some of these other turf grass settings, be able to apply a wetting agent and the humates for beneficial water management in a form that was easy for more people to accomplish. Liquid applications are much harder on smaller turf grass situations. So when we develop our applications, this was our best way to accomplish this. We have blends with multiple nutrient loads, both warm season and cool season turf grass. So we have blends that have been set up for your climates down in the Texas area. They are products that address not only the water management and the benefits of the wetting agent and the humates, but also adding organic matter. Because in many situations, when I run soil reports for certain parts of the country, we have very, very low organic matter in the Southwest. So adding organics along the way, this is a great way to do it. I just briefly brought up a label of one of our more popular products for soil treatments. It's a 631. In a nutshell, it's 2 organic sources, the humate coating, the wetting agent, some organic iron for color. Everybody likes a deeper dark green lawn, and then also some ammonium sulfate to help perk up the soil. So it's been a very common, very popular spring green up type product. I did mention earlier that excuse me. I did mention earlier that in many situations where we've had very dry winters, we need to re-wet the soil. Great product for that type of an application. So just a good all-round product, looking at water management, organics, humates, kind of putting together a granular product that has a good overall soil treatment for spring. And actually, I have many guys that use it throughout the entire season. So again, guys, thank you very much, and I'll turn it over for questions.
Hey, this is Scott. Just a quick question. So your the wetting agents that you covered, they're all non-ionic, right? And
Yeah. We do not carry anything in our current portfolio that fits into the other 2 categories. I just like to let people know about them, and let them know that there are issues when you start to cross over into some of these other anionic and cationic types of products.
right. And I saw you had the tournament ready, the sugar one. You kind of glossed. How does that compare to the copolymer ones?
You know, I've seen some sold in this market, and what I would tell you is that it'd be more similar to like some of the stuff that we have in research, where we take the co-block. The co-block had no phytotoxicity, and we have a very, very consistent breakdown, so we know when to reapply. What I see with some of those types of products, depending on the microbial activity and some other factors in the soils, we don't sometimes know how long they're going to last. So we get inconsistent performance.
Okay. And the other thing was, so I'm looking at getting a fertilizer injector system.
Yep.
So I'm researching it. Do you have any brands that you would recommend, or?
I dealt with Winfield has dealt with a reseller, we call them. It's a irrigation company. They carry a fertigator. I've set up a bunch of them and had great success. You can go with a little bit more sophisticated one, where we have access to some of the Neptune systems and have actually built a small Neptune system into a residential. A little more expensive, but it was a little more accurate than the Fertigator. But I've had great success with the Fertigators, to be honest.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. I'll check it out. So with so you can put your wetting agent through that injector.
So basically, with these home injectors, many of them are set up to take solubles. So they have that capability. In a nutshell, they bring water in, slurry whatever's in the tank, and then pump it out throughout the system. And experimenting with the guys here that have the Fertigator, we started putting concentrated liquids in and saw no difference in performance. If you're going to go straight liquids, something like some of the more economical, smaller Neptune pump systems work great. Basically, you can have to build something to draw out of. So I've seen guys that will bury, a 5-gallon container in a valve box next to the irrigation system on the outtake side, and then run it off of that. I've done that on some small sports turf fields and also residential settings. But those Neptune pumps are, 2 times what the Fertigator costs.
Right. All right. Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
You bet. Any other questions, comments?
Hey, Robert, this is Jonathan Orsanu. This is my first time hearing about wetting agents. When they're applied, typically, how long do they last?
So, when you look at the labels, let's look at the label for AquaSync. A 4-ounce application per 1,000 square feet is going to be about a month. When you look at the rates with the granular on fertilizer that I talked about, those are going to be about a 5-week to 6-week application. So one of the most common ones, other than the example that I put up, the 631, it's our 2137, and that's going to be about a 6-week application at a pound of nitrogen. So most of those, you're going to have an amount of time based on the rate. You increase the rate, you're going to get more time. So
Okay.
the only thing you have to worry about is if you start to look at some of the other more phytotoxic products, you're going to have wetting agents that need to be applied at lower rates. So you can't do that, like the 1690, 16 ounces. That's when you start thinking about that's 5.3 gallons per acre at that rate. That's a lot of material but you get 90 days. So it just depends on the product. And that's something that, it's easy to determine. And many of the labels are written, amount of material, amount of time type of a labeling.
Hey, and Jonathan, just to add into that a little bit more, if you're able to go out more frequently with wetting agents, like 1 ounce per 1,000 every week, you're probably going to have better results than if you go out with 4 ounces every 4 weeks. And the reason for that is just because wetting agents are degraded in the soil. They're eaten up by microbes. And so if you have warmer soil temperatures, you're going to have more microbes in the soil, meaning that your wetting agent isn't going to last as long. So it depends on temperature of the soil. But
great point.
Yep.
Hey, on that same point, can you mix the wetting agents with other things? Like I'll be throwing down some citric acid
Perfect. No problem.
weekly also?
Yep, not a problem.
Awesome.
Yeah, we haven't found too many issues with wetting agents and mixing in the tank. The thing you might need to think about is some wetting agents need to be watered in immediately after they're applied. And most of our wetting agents, you'll have some pretty good leeway. Maybe the next morning you can water it into the root zone or wherever you need the wetting agent to sit in the soil. But you have to consider the other products that you're applying to. Like I wouldn't do a herbicide or a contact fungicide or insecticide with a wetting agent because you want to water that wetting agent into the soil.
versus
Right.
letting the others dry on the plant.
Yeah, I always water in immediately. Where I try to. It takes an hour to get it. I got 8 zones, so just to
So
get
are
a.
you utilizing the citric acid as an acidifier in your product with your product?
Yeah, my pH is 8, so I'm trying to
Okay.
drop it, and this is going to be my first year trying it.
Send me an email. And that's very common for Western Colorado, especially. And I have a program of product that's at a pH of 3.6. Actually, the humic L that I showed, that's also at a pH of about 3.6. So I have many people that mix a wetting agent with that product for alkaline soil conditions. And we get great performance out of it. 2 products together. It'll give you a little longer. It's a phosphoric acid based rather than a citric acid based. So it has a little more acidification per. It's got a lower molarity than the citric acid.
Yeah, well, that's good because I'm a little scared with citrics, just because I don't want to burn my lawn.
Much safer product. I mean, I've used it in multiple turf situations for exactly. When you get over into the western part of the state in Colorado, I have customers in the Fruita area that they have pH soils of 8.4, 8.7, and irrigation water of 8. So we're constantly dealing with that alkaline condition.
All right, cool. Yeah, so I'll send you my soil test, and we can work from
no,
there.
That's great. I can definitely put a program and give you some ideas.
Awesome. Thank you.
Alrighty, well, if that's all the questions, and again, I put both Kevin and Rob's information in the chat. We'll be also sending a discount code for 25% off all of wetting agents. That'll be good for another month, and I'll be sending all that to Cindy along with the recording. So thank you so much for everyone joining, and we'll talk next month sometime about a different topic, and we'll be sending that to Sandy as well. So thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you very much. All right. Cheers.
Thank you. It's great.